The bottle came from a passing vehicle. That was how it always started with things that ended civilizations. Not with a declaration or a drum. A piece of trash flung from a window. In the case of Corporal Ren Herschel, the object was an alien transit pod's ejected coolant canister, spinning end over end through the ceasefire corridor at waypoint Cathara, and it struck him in the left temple at approximately 190 kilometers per hour. His father, Elias Herschel, standing 6 meters away on the neutral platform, hands still raised in the open palm gesture the Vaethari considered a greeting, watched it happen and did not scream. He was a scientist. He catalogued the event, the trajectory, the mass, the sound. He noted that the Vaethari transport did not slow. He noted that the diplomat seated in its rear observation deck turned to watch Ren fall and then looked away. He noted all of it. 3 years later, Dr. Elias Herschel sent 6 invitations to a retreat station in the outer belt of Moran's Reach. The station was called the Paraclete. It had been a private therapeutic facility before the war. The kind of place where shell-shocked officers were sent to recover in rotating gravity comfort, surrounded by mineral pools and soft lighting, and the engineered silence of deep space. Elias had purchased it for a sum that represented everything he owned, then spent 18 months retrofitting the lower levels. The upper floors he left pristine. 6 suites, a common room, a pool enclosure kept at a constant 34 degrees Celsius because certain Vaethari physiologies ran cold, a dining room, a small garden with engineered plants under full-spectrum light. The invitations had been careful. They were not invitations to justice. They were invitations to a symposium. Elias had considerable standing in xenobiology, and he had spent 3 years maintaining that standing, publishing, presenting, smiling at conferences, shaking the long fish hands of Vaethari colleagues who called him by his first name and never once asked about his son. The symposium was titled Neurochemical Bridges in Post-Conflict Societies. It was on paper exactly the kind of low-threat diplomatic theater that both human and Vaethari administrations approved of, because it made them feel like the war was further behind them than it was. 6 guests confirmed, 2 human, 4 Vaethari. Elias received the confirmations at his desk in the lower level, 3 floors below the guest suites in the room where Ren lay. The room was always green. Not from the walls were white, but from the array of monitors ringing the central bed, their readouts casting a wash of pale light across everything. Ren was 26 years old, and he had not opened his eyes in 3 years. But he breathed on his own. The machines helped him breathe, in the early days. Now they simply watched. His EEG was not the EEG of a sleeping man, it was not the EEG of a dreaming man. It was something Elias had shown to 3 different neurologists. 2 of them Vaethari specialists in Bridgework cognition, and none of them had been able to name it. One of them had gone very quiet and asked if she could run additional scans. Elias had declined. He had thanked her for her time. He had already understood what the readings meant. He pulled up the confirmations and read each name. Tevel Cross, Senior Trade Attaché, Vaethari Expansion Bureau, present in the Cathara Waypoint Transit Corridor on the day of the incident. Vehicle manifest confirmed. Doshin Yule, Cultural Liaison, 2nd rank. Present Merrick Vane, Human Intelligence Contractor, former Waypoint Security. Present, and the man Elias suspected had arranged for the corridor to be cleared of witnesses. Petra Vane, his wife. Present by association. Elias had debated her invitation for 3 weeks. He had sent it anyway. Lirith, a Vaethari academic, whose presence gave the symposium credibility, and who had nothing to do with Cathara, except that she had once at a dinner laughed at a joke another Vaethari made about human grief responses being chemically indistinguishable from comedy. She did not remember making that impression on Elias. Elias remembered everything. And finally, Nara Solis, a physician, a human. She was the one wild variable, the one guest Elias had not invited for his sake but for his own. She had been treating a patient at the Cathara Waypoint Clinic on the day, had filed the most detailed incident report of anyone present, and she was, if he was being honest with himself, the only person he had met in 3 years whose company did not make him feel like he was performing humanity for an audience. He had sat across from her at a conference in Meridian Station, and she had said, very quietly, that she was sorry about his son, and she had not followed it with anything, just the sorry. And then she had looked out the viewport at the stars, and Elias had looked with her for a moment, and that had been enough. He had almost not invited her. He had written the invitation 5 times. He had sent the 6th. He stood now at Ren's bedside and placed his hand on his son's forearm, where the skin had grown pale from 3 years without sunlight. "They're coming," he said. The monitors flickered. Not a spike, more like a slow, deep pulse, the way a tide moves before anyone calls it a wave. Elias watched the readout for a long time. Then he went upstairs to prepare the rooms. The guests arrived over 2 days. The Vathari traveled in their own shuttle, which docked at the secondary berth and maintained its own atmosphere lock, a precaution that was technically courteous and practically a statement. Cross disembarked first, filling the airlock threshold with a frame that belonged to a creature built for a heavier world. 4 limbs, yes, but the musculature was distributed differently, gathered at the shoulder girdle and hip, the torso comparatively narrow, the face a landscape of pale cartilage and deep-set amber eyes that caught light the way good optics did, bending it slightly. He was dressed in diplomat's gray with a sash of dark violet that indicated rank. He said, in excellent standard, Dr. Herschel. Your facility's reputation precedes it. I hope it lives up to expectation. Elias said and smiled. He was very good at the smile. Marek Vane arrived separately, with his wife in a private charter. He was a broad man going soft at the edges, the kind of physical confidence that had not kept up with the body carrying it. He pumped Elias's hand and said the symposium sounded fascinating and asked what the bar situation was. Petra Vane stood a half step behind him and said nothing, but she looked at the station with the slightly too careful attention of someone trying to determine if they were in danger. Elias filed that observation. Nara arrived last alone, with a single bag and a medical kit that she kept close. She was smaller than Elias remembered. She looked at him for a moment when she stepped off the dock connector, and something in her face shifted. Not surprise exactly. More like recognition of something she had not been sure was real. The invitation was unexpected, she said. I needed someone with a good incident report, he said. She almost smiled. Almost. That's an interesting reason to invite someone to a retreat. I have a son downstairs, he said. I thought you should know that before dinner. She looked at him steadily. Is that relevant to the symposium? It will be, he said. The first evening passed the way these things always did. Wine, 3 varieties, one formulated for Vathari biochemistry. A meal that was adequate. Conversation that was careful. Cross held court with the ease of a man who had spent decades making humans feel both flattered and diminished by his attention. Doshin Yule was quieter, watching, his amber eyes moving slowly around the room with the patience of a deep-water predator. Lirith, the academic, launched into a detailed account of her recent research on human amygdala response to interspecies social threat, which she seemed genuinely not to notice was rude, and Marek Vane laughed too loudly at the wrong moments, and Petra Vane drank her wine and watched everything. Nara sat near Elias and said very little. At one point, Doshin Yule asked her how long she had been practicing xelenomedicine, and she said 11 years, and he said the field was still in its infancy, really. And she said yes, and the conversation moved on. Under the table, out of sight, her hand rested against her medical kit. That night, alone in her suite, she opened the kit and ran a diagnostic scan on herself. Force of habit, she did it every time she entered a new atmospheric environment. The scan came back clean. She lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling, and thought about the incident report she had filed 3 years ago. The one that had described a human corporal lying in a ceasefire corridor, with a fractured temporal bone and an anomalous neural signature that no scanner at the Cathara clinic had been able to classify. She had flagged it for review. She had never received a response. She thought about Elias Herschel's face when he said it will be. She slept badly. Ren felt them arrive before any sensor in the station confirmed it. Not as presences exactly, more as textures. The Vathari had a quality to them that the humans didn't. A kind of dense electromagnetic stillness, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air itself seems to be waiting. He had noticed it before, during the war, before Cathara. Standing guard in transit corridors while diplomatic personnel moved through, he had always been able to feel when the Vathari were close. He had chalked it up to nerves. He understood now that it had never been nerves. He couldn't describe what he was, lying here. He wasn't asleep, he wasn't awake. He was something his nervous system had invented, after the canister strike had rewritten the architecture of his frontal lobe in ways that his father's monitoring equipment could measure but not interpret. He could feel the station. Not metaphorically. He could feel the vibration of the docking clamps in the secondary berth, the specific resonance of the mineral pool heating elements, the pulse of the ventilation system like a slow breath. The station had become a kind of body, and he moved inside it the way awareness moves inside a person, automatic, pervasive, without effort. He could feel his father, always. the weight of him on the upper floors, the specific rhythm of his steps. He had tried in the early months to communicate. There had been incidents, monitors spiking, lights flickering, a tablet that had thrown itself off a shelf. His father had understood. His father had begun to talk to him every day sitting beside the bed, updating him on the world, the war's formal end, the symposia, the conferences, the names especially. He felt Tevel Cross on the upper level and recognized something in the electromagnetic signature that matched the Viathari diplomatic shuttle's records. The same resonance, the same stillness. He held that recognition very carefully, the way you hold something that might break. He felt Narasolis too. She was different. There was no stillness in her. She moved through the station's field like light moves through water, with refraction, with warmth, bending around things rather than passing through them. He had no reference point for her, except that she felt somehow like the only honest signal in a room full of interference. He turned his attention away from her. He had work to do first. Linden Cross went swimmings on the second morning. The pool enclosure was a long oval of dark water lit from beneath. The temperature kept warm because Elias had calibrated it for Vathari comfort. Cross entered at 0600 station time, which was early, which suggested either insomnia or the kind of physical discipline that fills time before it can fill itself with doubt. He swam well. His body was built for it. That distributed musculature, those long limbs pulling through the water with the efficiency of something evolved to move through resistance. He was 50 meters into his third lap when the water temperature began to rise. Not quickly. That was the thing about it. Not quickly, not dramatically, not like a warning. The increment was small enough that his body adjusted to it, the way bodies do, the way a frog in a warming pot adjusts, and by the time the adjustment became impossible, the temperature had passed the threshold for Vathari vascular stress by 6 full degrees. The autopsy, when Elias filed one 3 hours later, would indicate a cardiac event consistent with acute hyperthermic shock. Tragic. The pool heating system would show evidence of a calibration fault. Elias had prepared the documentation months ago. He was a thorough man. He stood at the pool's edge afterward and looked at the water. Then he looked at the ceiling as if he could see through the 3 floors between him and the lower level. "1," he said quietly. The station changed after that. Not structurally, in mood. The remaining Vathari were officially informed of an equipment failure and a tragic accident. Tevel Cross made the notification call himself, his face composed behind the camera, his voice measured. Elias watched him and saw nothing in the amber eyes that looked like grief. What he saw was calculation. Good, he thought. Calculate. Doshin Yule moved differently after the announcement. More careful. His eyes tracked the room's exits. The Vathari, for all their diplomatic polish, were still creatures of an older evolution. They read closed spaces as potential traps and responded accordingly. He requested to move his quarters closer to the docking berth. Elias accommodated him with great cordiality. Marek Vane drank more. His wife stopped eating. Nara came to Elias's office on the afternoon of the second day and stood in the doorway with her arms folded and said, "What's happening here?" Elias looked up from his work. He had prepared for this conversation. He found, now that it was happening, that he had not prepared for her eyes. The particular quality of attention in them, the refusal to be deflected. "A man died," he said. "The calibration fault," she said. It was not a question. It was a statement in the shape of a question. "The investigation will take time. Elias." Just his name. The way she'd said it at the Cathara clinic 3 years ago, after she'd been asked to file the report and had filed it honestly and completely despite the political pressure to be vaguer. Just his name as a weight placed on a scale. He looked at his desk. He looked at his hands on his desk. He thought about the 6 invitations and the reasons for each of them. And then he thought about the one reason he was no longer sure about. "My son is downstairs," he said. "He's been downstairs for 3 years. He's 26 years old and he can't open his eyes and he can't speak. And the people in this station were present at the event that caused it, and 2 of them actively participated in suppressing the incident report." Nara was quiet. "One of those 2 is dead," Elias said. "The others will follow." The silence stretched long enough that he could hear the ventilation system, the soft pulse of the station breathing. "How?" she said, not objecting. Asking. "My son has abilities that developed as a consequence of his injury. I've spent 3 years understanding them and building systems to augment them. The machine in the lower level amplifies his neural output across the station's own field. He can affect objects. He can affect systems. He can." Elias paused. "Biological processes." within certain parameters. Nara absorbed this. She had a doctor's stillness, the capacity to receive terrible information without visibly flinching. 3 other patients, she said, comatose. I noticed them on the lower-level manifest. Elias said nothing. You're using them as a relay, she said. It was not an accusation, it was diagnosis. Their neural output, combined with his. You've been building this for 3 years. The other patients are stable. They're well cared for. They didn't consent to this. They are former soldiers who were injured in the same campaign that injured Ren. They have no living relatives. They are receiving better care here than any government facility would provide. That is not the same as consent. No, Elias said. It isn't. Another silence. She put her hand on the doorframe and he saw that her knuckles were white. How many more, she asked. 5 remain. After cross 5. And then? Then I take Ren somewhere they'll never find him and I disappear, and whatever they want to do with me, they do. She looked at him for a long time. He did not look away. Tell me about the people who suppressed the report, she said. Doshin Yule was the first to feel it. He was in his quarters, composing a secure transmission to the Vathari Diplomatic Authority, when the lights in his room shifted. Not off, just altered, the whites pulling toward green, the shadows lengthening in directions that did not correspond to the ith light sources. He stood. He was a careful individual and he did not panic easily. He stood and he looked at the light and he thought, equipment fault. Second one in 2 days, this facility is compromised. He picked up his personal comm and called Taval Cross. The call went through. He heard Cross answer. Then the call ended. Not dropped, ended. The signal remained present, but the audio simply ceased, as if something had reached into the connection and closed a hand around the sound. He went to the door. The door did not open. Doshinule was a cultural liaison of the 2nd rank, but he had not always been. He had been, before diplomacy, an intelligence officer, and he had spent years in situations that required the specific calm of knowing that you might die and choosing how to use the time before that happened. He sat down, he breathed. He looked at the green light and the wrong shadows, and he said, in his own language, the phrase that translates roughly as, I see you, and I want you to know that I see you. The lights pulsed once, deep and slow, like a heartbeat. Doshinule understood then. Not the how, not the mechanism, the machine in the basement, the sleeping boy, the father's 3-year architecture of grief and revenge. But the what. He understood the what very clearly. He had understood it, he realized, since the morning of the pool, when he had looked at Elias Herschel's face above the body of Taval Cross and seen something behind the appropriate expression that was not grief and not shock and not guilt. Something that had been waiting, he said, still in his own language. The boy at Cathara. I did not throw the bottle. A long silence. The green light stayed green. I knew about it afterward, he said. I filed nothing. I said nothing. I attended 3 funerals that year for humans killed in the corridor, and I thought, war, these things happen in war. I told myself that. I told myself that for 3 years. The light shifted, warmer now. Not forgiveness. Doshin Yule was not so foolish as to read forgiveness into a light's color, but acknowledgement, the specific register of being heard. His door opened. He sat very still for a moment. Then he stood and walked out, and the corridors were clear, and he walked to the docking berth and sat in the airlock antechamber and did not move for 2 hours, and no one came for him. Marek Vane broke on the 3rd night. It was not a dramatic break. He was sitting in the common room with a glass of Vathari grain spirit that he had found in a cabinet, and he was staring at the viewport and the stars beyond it. And Elias came in and sat across from him and said nothing, and Vane said, I know what this is. Elias waited. I know what you built down there. I was in security for 15 years. I've seen experimental systems, neural amplification, psychokinetic research from both sides of the war. I know what the signs look like. He drank. The boy can move things. Yes, Elias said the pool. Yes, Vane laughed. It was an awful sound, not because it was cruel, but because it wasn't. It was the laugh of a man who found something specifically and personally funny, in the most wretched possible way. I didn't throw the bottle, he said. I want you to know that. I know you didn't. I cleared the corridor. I made sure there were no recorders in the secondary section. I was paid to do it by Vathari interests who wanted the ceasefire to fail. There were factions on both sides who needed to fail, you understand. The war was profitable for too many people on too many sides. One human casualty in the ceasefire zone, properly documented, would have been enough. I was paid to make that documentation impossible. He looked at his hands. I didn't know anyone was going to be hurt, he said. I want you to understand that. I knew someone might be used. I didn't know what that meant, practically, I told myself. He stopped. Tried again. I told myself it would be a minor incident. A provocation. I didn't think. You stopped thinking, Elias said. That's what people do when they're paid enough. They stopped thinking to the end of the sentence. Vane was quiet. The stars moved very slowly in the viewport, the station's rotation carrying them in a long arc. My wife knew nothing, he said. She found out afterward. He closed his eyes. She hasn't been the same. Neither has my son. Another silence. What are you going to do? Vane asked. Elias stood. He looked at the man across the table. The broad shoulders, the softness at the edges, the glass in the hands. And he thought about Ren at 23 years old, standing in a ceasefire corridor with his hands raised in the open palm gesture. Because he had been told it was how you showed the victory you meant no harm. He thought about the sound the canister had made when it struck. I'm going to let my son decide, he said. He left Vane there. He went downstairs. Ren felt his father's weight on the stairs. He felt the conversation the way he felt all things now. Not as words exactly, but as patterns, resonances. The electromagnetic signature of emotion moving through biological tissue. He had felt Vane's guilt for 3 days, a specific frequency, the particular vibration of a man who had spent years building a structure of justification that was now falling. He had felt the moment it collapsed. He had let Doshinul go. He had known that since the second night when the cultural liaison had sat in the green light and spoken to him in his own language, and Ren, who had studied Vathari linguistics during his 2 years in the ceasefire program, who had believed genuinely and without irony that the war could end if enough people learned each other's words, had understood every phrase. He had heard the confession, and he had felt the truth inside it. There was a difference between the electromagnetic signature of a lie and the signature of a truth. And he had learned to read that difference over 3 years of lying in this bed, feeling his father talk. He had not let Vane go yet. He was still deciding. He could feel Nara now on the lower level. She had come downstairs quietly 20 minutes ago and was sitting in the corridor outside his room. Not inside. Outside, she had not tried to open the door. She was sitting on the floor against the wall, which he found, in whatever capacity he had for finding things, oddly moving. Like she didn't want to intrude but couldn't make herself leave. He opened the door. She looked up. Then she stood slowly and walked in. She did not react to the monitors the way most people did. Not with alarm or clinical detachment, but with the attention of someone who had spent years in rooms like this, and had never stopped finding them significant. She walked to his bedside and looked at him and said softly, "Hello." He could not answer. He did not have that mechanism. But he could see her, not with his eyes, which remained closed, but with the field, the electromagnetic detail of a human body standing close to him. Warm, complex. The specific resonance he had noticed on the first day, the light and water quality. He reached out, not physically, through the station, through the field, through the specific frequency his nervous system had developed in 3 years of lying still. The tablet on the shelf beside the bed lit up. A cursor blinked. Then slowly letters. HELLO. Nara looked at the tablet, then back at him, then at the tablet again. Okay, she said very quietly. Okay. She pulled the chair to his bedside and she sat down. She said, I filed the report. I want you to know that. I filed everything. They ignored it. I should have done more. She paused. I've been trying to figure out what more looked like for 3 years. The cursor blinked. YOUCAMEHERE. Your father invited me. She hesitated. I think I came because I wanted to see if you were real. The report, the neural signatures I documented, I didn't know what they meant. I still don't know what I'm looking at. SOMETHINGNEW. Yes. She looked at his face, pale still, the face of a young man who had not moved in 3 years. Does it hurt? A long pause. The cursor blinked several times without producing a letter. Then LESSTHANITDID. Your father, she said. The people upstairs. IKNOWWHATHDOING. She looked at her hands, and DWLEFT she understood. Teval Cross and Petra Vane. IKNOW. Then why? The cursor stopped for a long time. She sat with the silence the way she'd sat with a viewport in Meridian Station and waited. SHEKNEWFORTNDSAIDNOTHING. Nara closed her eyes. That's not the same as being responsible. IKNOWTHATTOO. What are you going to do? The light in the room shifted, just slightly. The green of the monitors deepened for a moment, then returned to normal. WHATIAMDECIDING. She nodded. She looked at his face again. The stillness, the closed eyes. The 26 years of a life that had been interrupted and rerouted into something neither of them had a name for yet. Whatever you decide, she said. Your father goes to trial. I'm a witness. I have the original incident report and 3 years of documentation, and I will testify to all of it, including what he built down here." She paused. "I'm sorry. I know that's not THATICHONEST. It's the best I can offer. ITICNOUGH. Tevel Cross found the door to his suite locked on the 4th morning. Not the exterior lock, the interior mechanism, the simple panel that should have responded to his ID. It did not respond. He pressed it 4 times, then 5, and then he turned around and looked at his room and noted the color of the light, green. He was not a stupid individual. He had been a diplomat for 20 years and a Vathari intelligence officer for 12 years before that. And he had survived the war by understanding, before anyone else in the room did, which way a situation was moving. He understood now. He sat at the room's desk and folded his long-fingered hands on the surface and said, in standard, "I see I am being held." The lights pulsed once. "I wish to speak," he said. "Not to confess. I have nothing to confess. What occurred at Cathara was sanctioned at levels I cannot name and would not name regardless. The ceasefire needed to fail. Not from cruelty, you understand, but from strategic necessity. There are individuals on your side as well who shared this assessment. The human who was injured," he paused, "was not supposed to be injured. He was supposed to be frightened. The individual who threw the canister exceeded their parameters." The light shifted. Something in the room began to move. Just a small thing, a stylus on the desk, rolling to the edge, rolling back, rolling to the edge, rolling back. Cross watched it. "I understand that this is not relevant to you," he said. "I understand that the distinction between intended and unintended harm means nothing to someone who has been lying in a bed for 3 years. I am not asking for mercy on those grounds." He looked at the moving stylus. "I am asking you to consider that killing me will not restore what was taken. I am also asking you to consider that I have the capacity to provide information about who ordered the Cathara operation, about the networks that funded it, about individuals on both sides who have not been brought to account, that no one else currently alive can provide." The stylus stopped. Deval Cross waited. Green light was very still, then they're activated. The cursor blinked. WHATDOYOUWANTFORIT. Cross looked at the screen. He looked at it for a long time. "Safe passage," he said, "for myself and my staff, and the assurance that whatever trial follows, and I understand there will be a trial, I am permitted to testify under diplomatic protection rather than as a prisoner." The cursor blinked. Then, THATICNOTOAK. "Whose is it?" APPORT. Cross looked at the screen. Then slowly he almost smiled, the specific exhausted smile of a man who has been outmaneuvered by something he did not expect. "The physician who filed at Cathara," he said. "Yes, she's been here the entire time. Yes, and you've been speaking with her." Yes, the cursor stopped. Then IHAVEBENSPEAKINGTO. Marek Vane turned himself in before sunrise. He came to the station's communication center, and he sat down and he opened a channel to the Interspecies Justice Commission and he said, clearly and without prompting, that he wished to make a statement regarding an incident at the Cathara Waypoint ceasefire corridor 3 years ago. He gave his name. He gave his former employer's name. He gave the names of the Vathari intelligence officers who had paid him, names he had been carrying for 3 years in the part of himself that had gone very quiet the night. Petra told him she knew. Petra was standing in the doorway of the communications center when he finished. She had been there for most of it. She did not look at him when he was done. She looked at the ceiling as if she could see through the 3 floors to the lower level, to the room with the green light. She said, "Is he listening?" Vane looked at the terminal. The screen, which had been dark, lit up. YCS. She put her hand over her mouth, then she removed it. "I'm sorry," she said. "I have been sorry for 2 years and I didn't know how to make it reach anyone, and I'm sorry." The screen held its cursor for a long time. THENYOUKNOW. Nara came downstairs one last time before the commission ships arrived. Elias was at his desk, reading, or appearing to read, and she stood in the doorway the way she had before and said, "The 3 other patients," he looked up. "They need to be transferred to a proper facility, assessed, their families notified if there are families." "I know," he said. "You know you're going to be arrested." "Yes, and Ren?" Elias was quiet for a moment. "That depends on what he wants," he said. "I've spent 3 years deciding what Ren wants. I think I owe it to him to let him decide for himself." She nodded. She went into the lower level, past the 3 other sleeping bodies, into the room with the green light. She sat beside him. "The ships are coming," she said. "About 4 hours." She paused. "I'll be here, for the trial, for whatever comes after." The cursor blinked. IKNOW, I don't know what after looks like for you. For what you are now, I don't think AKESTWOOFU, she almost smiled. The room was green and quiet, and she could hear the deep vibration of the station. Not frightening, she realized. Not mechanical, but alive. The way a sleeping body is alive. The way a resting mind is alive. You could have killed all of them, she said. THEWARENDBEC. And some T. Cross undidden. She looked at his face. Still, pale, 26. Dawshan. Yecha, she said, you letting AEGUASBEIHEARD. She thought about that. She thought about a young soldier in a ceasefire corridor who had studied Vathari linguistics because he believed the war could end if enough people learned each other's words. And about what it meant that he still believed that. Are you angry, she asked. The cursor blinked, once, twice, a long pause. YESANDTHATISNOTALLIAM. She stayed with him until the commission ships appeared on the docking approach. 4 hours later, their lights moving in the viewport of the lower level like slow, careful stars. She watched his monitors. She watched the steady, complex rhythm that no neurologist had been able to name. Something new, she had said. Yes, the tablet had said. She thought there should be a word for it by now. 3 years, and no word yet. She thought about the specific way his mind had reached for her on that night. The warmth of it, the distinctly human quality of it, the curiosity, the grief, the refusal to resolve into something simpler. She thought, that's what you build when you take everything else away. When the body goes still and the world goes quiet and all that's left is the mind, reaching. She thought, we are very good at reaching. She put her hand on the bed beside his. Not on his hand, just beside it. Close enough, the monitors pulsed, deep and steady, and the green light held.